It told me that it's now in 30 chapters, in 30 languages, and has sold a lot of books, and will sell a lot more when the movie comes out in November. Since this is a conference about humans going to Mars, the question that arises is, of course, why not the European, or the Titan, or the man on the moon? Why the Martian?
Well, Mars is the next obvious location for us to explore. I mean, we've been to the moon, and I would actually like us to go back to the moon. I mean, there's a difference between, the fictional world I created and the real world in which we live, of course. And I think it's much more plausible to go back to the moon before we go to Mars, if nothing else, to use it as a proving ground for the technology that we're planning to use to go to Mars. Also, there's the question of finding ways to generate rocket fuel outside of Earth's gravity. Well, I'm sure you guys have been talking about that throughout your whole conference. But yeah, Mars is the next exciting new frontier. It's the nearest plausible destination that we haven't yet been to. Now, technically, the nearest, planet to us is Venus, but Venus is hell. Venus is pretty much literally hell. It's 500 degrees Celsius on the surface, it's 90 atmospheres of pressure, it has as much gravity as Earth, which means to get back off of it, you'd need rockets about as big as the ones that you need to get off of Earth, even bigger to shove through that atmosphere. So it's miserable and just well beyond our current technology to deal with. But Mars is interesting. Mars has problems that we already know how to overcome. We know how to deal with being almost a vacuum. We know how to deal with it being really cold. And it's just captivating. The public consciousness has always been more interested in Mars than any other planet.
As someone who has been in this world for many years as kind of a follower, and then now as an author, do you have a kind of a seat of the pants sense of when humans might actually make it to Mars?
I get asked that a lot, and my stock answer is probably around 2050. I know that sounds further away than most people would like to hear, but the technology necessary to get there and the costs of getting there are just very high, and it's a big challenge. I would very much, I hope that I get to live to see that day. And 2050 might turn out to be optimistic. I mean, around the time of the Apollo missions, they were saying, oh, we're going to be in Mars by the late 1980s, So it always just keeps getting pushed off. However, I will say this, although this isn't a question you asked, this is a thing that I always like to say. Space technology will eventually have an explosion of popularity because we will eventually, one way or another, make it cheap enough for commercial use. Now, there are people actively working on that right now, like Virgin Galactic and SpaceX, but whether or not we sink billions of dollars into it, it will eventually happen. And for an example of that, I would talk about a saddle, as in a thing you put on a horse. Saddles nowadays are better in every conceivable way than the saddles that the cowboys wore in the mid-1800s. And it's not because we spent billions of dollars researching saddle technology for the last 150 years. It's because we invented technology for other reasons that happen to be useful for saddles. Like, oh, this new material, oh, this kind of cloth, oh, this is a very rugged way of assembling a flexible object such that no amount of flexing will ruin it. And over time, saddles have gotten just amazingly better. The cowboys of the past would have killed for the saddles we have now. And just in the same way, I think that's probably how space technology is going to advance. There'll be a company will invent some new material for turbine jet engines, and it'll turn out to be just like the perfect spacecraft hull, that sort of thing. So even if we don't desperately work on it and sink every cent we have into it, we